Good afternoon. Thank you for watching this video sponsored by the Law Office of Travell Travis, your low-cost, high-quality law firm. We encourage you to follow, like, share our videos and posts, as well as connect with us on social media, email, and website for Gmail, Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, as well as Facebook, Travell Travis, one word, and you can connect with me on my website, social media, and by email. As a disclaimer, these videos are for educational and advertising purposes. It does not create it did not cover the LGBT community. It's not mentioned specifically in the legislation. However, some courts have interpreted that gender discrimination covers LGBT issues. However, under federal law, under federal law, there's no specific legislation that provides protection under the federal law for the LGBT community as it relates to employment discrimination. However, 21 states do provide protection to the LGBT community, and also many cities and municipalities provide similar coverage. Practicing and licensed in Virginia, is currently one state that does not specifically extend employment discrimination to the LGBT community. Under the Civil Rights Act of 1964, there are an exemption for what are called religious organizations, churches, religious organizations, religious corporations, including even religious-owned schools and colleges. Specifically, the law covers if the purpose or the character is religious, even if it has secular characteristics, if it's significantly religious, it's most likely exempt from the Civil Rights Act of 1964 when it comes to religious matters, not race, not gender, not origin, but specifically as it relates to religious beliefs and practices. And so when we talk about a religious corporation or church-owned corporation, it also has been extended to things such as daycare centers owned by the church, hospitals, schools, as well as universities. And so it's important that a church or religious organization review its bylaws as it relates to clearly expressing and establishing its religious purpose. Also in terms of its nonprofit status, as well as the financial backing of that organization, as whether it is funded by the church or sponsored by the church. So it's important that churches review its doctrine, its bylaws, its policies, and procedures as it relates to the issue of the LGBT community and specifically same-sex couples. Churches, church-owned businesses may want to make revisions to its bylaws, update its bylaws, have amendments to the bylaws that address specific issues such as defining marriage and the scriptural support of an official church definition of what is marriage. Also, secondly, perhaps what types of marriages that the church will not recognize, albeit same-sex, perhaps incest relationships, polygamy, also in terms of marriage, divorce, and remarriage. So it's not just specifically addressing perhaps same-sex marriage, but one, defining marriage, but then two, perhaps having a statement that addresses perhaps other relationships that the church will not recognize. You also may want to have some type of statement as it relates to employees and their practices and their lifestyle. Perhaps you have paid staff at your church or your daycare center, paid musicians or other people, whether paid or volunteers. Does your bylaws speak to lifestyle matters, and specifically perhaps same-sex relationships, but more broadly perhaps any illicit or non-biblically approved, if you will, sexual relationships. Number 4, officers in your church, trustees, ecclesiastical officers, your ministers, perhaps your deacons, other members of the church. Are they are members of the LGBT community or same-sex couples prohibited from holding official positions in your church? And if so, where is that written? Where is that policy documented? Where is that in the doctrine book? Where is that in your bylaws? And so if that is your belief and that is your practice, it's very important that those things are documented. Now, we spoke to employees, office holders, volunteers, but you also may want to speak to the broader congregation at large as it relates to, in particular, same-sex marriage. Are there any written policies in regards to members attending same-sex marriages, participating, perhaps singing, perhaps being a bridesmaid or groomsman, usher, providing floral arrangements, photographer in that regard? What about your ministers? Are there any documented rules for ministers in terms of actually performing or participating in the wedding, the exchange of vows, prayers, or any other part of the actual ceremony? Or in terms of your facilities, you might even want to speak to your facilities, your equipment. Can they take the sound system to a venue where the wedding or the reception took place? Can your church or your dining hall be used for any type of event related to a same-sex couple wedding? And that could be any pre-wedding events in terms of rehearsal dinners, engagement parties, the wedding, one of the ways to protect yourself or to make those views clear is to make sure that it is in writing. What is the church's doctrine, even related to same-sex marriage? in terms of will the church recognize that the marriage even exists? What are your doctrine related to divorce of a same-sex couple? What is the doctrine of your church as it relates to counseling, premarital counseling, marital counseling, counseling post marriage if the marriage is terminated or ends in death of one of the parties involved? Understand that the court may afford a certain level of protection to the church as it relates to its religious freedom, expression, and beliefs regarding the LGBT community and same-sex couples, but the court will not protect the church engaging in slander, defamation, harassment, perhaps public humiliation, intentional infliction of emotional distress. And we're talking about perhaps belittlement from the pulpit in terms of derogatory speech and comments that are made during perhaps a worship service. Keep in mind, if your facilities are open to the public, meaning anybody can rent your church or your dining facility, your family life center, for a recreational event, a wedding, a reception, a funeral, if you are concerned that it may be rented to a same-sex couple, and that's against your doctrine, your beliefs, and your policies, one of two things. One, make sure that is in writing, but you also may want to change your policy as it relates to renting your facilities to the public. Perhaps it should only be limited to members only, and then even then, it should perhaps be documented in writing which events are allowed or which events are not allowed, because it may even be a member who may want to have this type of event in your church. But once again, review your doctrine manual, doctrine book, your bylaws, as well as your policies and procedures. And if they've been spoken verbally, it's important that they are in writing, that they are known, and that they've been properly, vetted, well written, and approved by the appropriate bodies who have control or authority in your church. One last point about facility use. There are certain LGBT right groups who are actually challenging churches, actually intending to rent venues owned by churches to make an issue of this. And so once again, you want to make sure you look at your doctrine, your bylaws, your policies and procedures, your contracts, as it relates to whether it's public or private, for members only, and even for members only, under what type of conditions would you allow members to rent your church facilities. In closing, I want to say that this video is not to trash, belittle, or target anyone or group of people. It is only intended to address questions that pastors and churches have about the subject solely from a legal standpoint. I'm always reminded of the scripture of John 3:16 and 17. For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever believeth in him shall not perish, but shall have everlasting life. For God sent not his Son into the world to condemn the world, but that through him the world might be saved. And so if you have questions about your doctrinal book, your bylaws, your policies, your procedures as it relates to the LGBT community, perhaps a homosexual or lesbian lifestyle, as well as same-sex couples in your church, we invite you to contact us or a law firm. Understand that this video is for educational and advertising purposes. Is not a substitute for consulting a licensed attorney in your state. Once again, we thank you for watching this video. Please follow, like, share, comment, connect with us on our website, as well as our social media platforms or by email. God bless you and have a wonderful day.